992. Michelangalone. Error code 400. Chapter 5. The Story of the Lost Brother. Notes. Hey, stop to read PLS. Okay. This chapter has trigger warnings which I have to put at the end, sorry, since they do spoil it. So if you don't want to feel uncomfy, go look. And if you don't care, here I want to show you something. https://www.tumblr.com/error-code 400/710,209,095,100,464/OMG. Thank you so much. Your art style is Sue. Source equals share. Look at Karma Surround made fan art of my AU. Thank you so much for the support. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. We're home, Leo shouted as both he and Raph entered the lair. And we brought pizza, he continued as they made their way to the main area. Still no response. Donnie's favorite, Tony Lou's pizza. He proceeded to enter the kitchen with Raph close behind, carrying 2 bags filled with 2 boxes of wings and sodas. They were met with nothing but the dripping sound from the sink. Both Leo and Raph give each other a concerned look before putting the food down. Dang it, thought he would at least come out for his favorite place, Raph said, slumped over the food, almost defeated. He's been in there for 3 days straight. He hasn't come out for food or his daily flavorless juice. Raph continues as he took out the boxes of wings from its bag. Leo set down the 4 boxes of pizza. Come on, Raph, maybe we're overreacting after all. He's once stayed in there for weeks on end, Leo said, doing his best to cheer up his elder brother. I know this one just feels off, Raph said, looking towards the entrance of the kitchen, still hoping his little brother will come through the open doors. Leo shows a small expression of worry looking at the doors as well. He shakes it off, looking back at Raph. Relax, big brother, I'm sure he's just in another slump like last time. A slump, Raph said slightly sarcastically. You know, like he's stuck on something, and won't stop till he figures it out, he said, partially hugging his elder brother. And once he figures it out, he'll come out all excited and tell us all about how he figured it out in a 3 to the 4-part slideshow, he said, poking at Raph's plastron. Raph shoves Leo off playfully, to which Leo dramatically falls to the floor. Ma, is that the smell of cheesy goodness I smell? They heard a voice by the door. There stood their father, Splinter, entering. Hey Dad, help yourself, don't think Donnie is going to eat tonight, Raph said as opened the boxes of wings, all plain, just like how Donnie liked them. Ah, Purple's in a slump again, Splinter said as he approached the table grabbing a paper plate. See, Leo said teasingly, jumping up from the ground into a sitting position. Raph rolled his eyes at his brother. Yeah, I haven't seen him eat. We were hoping he would come out for this, he said, staring at the box full of wings. I see. I will be sure to drop off some food on my way back to the living room, Splinter said, carrying 2 plates out of the kitchen. Thanks, Raph said. Well, at least we know he will receive the food. After all, he only lets Dad and April in when he's like this, Leo said, still sitting on the floor. Raph's eyes go wide at the name. Raph's got it, he spoke enthusiastically, pulling out his phone. Leo, startled by the sudden reaction, shoots up and looks over Ralph's shoulders to see what he was doing. Got what? Leo asked, still peering over Raph's shoulder. If Donnie won't let us in, then we'll get the only other person who can. April, he said, putting his phone to his ear as it rings. Hey, not bad of a plan, put her on speaker, I want to talk to her, Leo said, trying to reach for the phone to talk to April. April walked to the entrance of the lair and took a deep breath of air when she entered. She hated the smell of the sewers, and despite traveling through the sewers for 4 years now, she's still not used to the smell. She is internally grateful for Donnie, who had made sure to have cleaned out the lair of any sewer smell after they all got a whiff of the slightly better air of New York. Not that anyone complained about it, they too were relieved to have a better smelling place to live. Hey April, she heard a familiar voice say as they approached. Hey Raph, how's he holding up? She said, walking towards the slider. Still cupped up in his room, Leo tried to get in to ensure he ate his food, but did not respond. He said as they both walked towards Donnie's lab. That okay, I'll check on that while I'm in there, she said, setting her backpack down by the entrance. They spot Leo still by the entrance of Donnie's entrance. He waves hi to April, who waves would be back. She walks up to the door about to knock when she heard Leo whisper something not so silently to Raph. Are we sure he will let her in? She turns to face Leo before reassuring him, saying don't worry, if he doesn't then I'll use the passcode. She said, wait, he gave you the passcode? Leo practically shouted. April smirked before knocking on the door. Complete silence. April frowned. She was about to knock again when the metal door hissed open. She stares back at the 2 boys, who seem to have to relive that Donnie responded. She smiles, giving them a thumbs up, and they do the same. She walks into the dimly lit purple and blue room, lit by the lighting of machines and lamps. The door behind her closes, enclosing her in the lighting. She looks ahead to see the mini screens on a wall and showed the outside of the lab where Leo and Raph were still waiting. The others seemed to be pie charts and other data collection. In the middle of all those screens was a chair. She can hear the clicking of a keyboard clacking away. She walks over, trying to gain Donnie's attention. "Hey, do you watch a working on?" she said as she approaches. Nothing. She frowns at his response. She pulls up a small chair and sits next to him. On the desk, she sees a plate with food on it, partially eaten. At least he's not starving himself, she thought. She looks around at the mini screens and some paper on the desk. "This doesn't look like nothing," she said, turning to Donnie. "Well, it is," he said before he continued working. Now, this was weird. Even if Donnie was in a slump, he still is very open about what he was working on. She looks around, watching the mini charts. She really couldn't make sense of them, just some charts that all had labels under them. She read the text, which made her eyes go wide. "Donnie, why is your and your brother's name on these charts?" she asked. The charts are immediately swept off the screen, and as soon as it is done, Donnie groans. "What DNA collection?" he shouted, hiding his keyboard behind his arms. "Is that why you do not want your brothers in here?" She continued, now standing up from the chair. "WHAAAT. No, I would never," he replied. April simply glares before gesturing at some of the papers on the table. Donnie looks and gulps down the lump in his throat. "Donnie, look, I get that you are just looking out for them, but maybe you should at least tell them that you're using their DNA. I mean, it's still an invasion of privacy." She gestures to the motors, trying to guess what he is using it for. "For whatever this is," she says. Donnie doesn't reply, just turns back to the keyboard and grabs the mouse, putting all the data back up. "It's not that simple," he replied. April was starting to get a bit concerned. Did Donnie find something that made him feel the need to hide and lock himself in his lab? "And why is that?" she asked him. He pulled up a chart on one of the bigger screens in front of them. He looks at her with a serious look in his eyes. "You promise you won't tell them about any of this?" April puts her hand over her heart and replies, "Promise." The soft shell pulls up videos on the screens. He opened a drawer and pulled out a jar containing a black shard. D, what that?" she asked, immediately pointing at the jar. "This is a piece of that mask that broke off of that dude we fought back at Alberto's land," he said, putting the jar down in between them. "You mean Goatface?" Donnie firmly nods, turning back to his screens. "Yeah, well, we ran into him again, and I got a look at what he looks like," he said, pulling up footage from that day. "And well, turns out he's a turtle." He pointed to the screen. April's mouth drew a gap at the screen in front of her. It showed an image of a turtle in the same clothing as Goatface from before. He seemed to be on a purple bike. "Whoa, okay, so he's a turtle, but what does this have to do with the whole DNA thing?" April said. "I didn't think much of it either at first. Just figured that he was a random mutant and pure coincidence," Donnie said, to April's confusion. He pulled up another video from a street cam that managed to catch a glimpse of a fight between Leo, Raph, and Draxum, but according to Leo, Draxum was the one who created us, which he found out in the middle of their fight on the roof. Donnie continued as he pulled out another security camera, this time in a hotel room. She could see Goatface and Donnie in their cocoon stuck together. Then, seeing Draxum free them, ordering Goatface to do something, he complied. "We also found out he is indeed working for Draxum, courtesy of their little exchange," he continued. April was starting to make sense of his ramble with some of the info that was just dumped on her. "Wait, you don't think he's," she muttered, only loud enough for Donnie to hear. "I thought about it, but I didn't want to believe it. So I started checking cameras and other footage I could scrape together," he proceeded, this time pulling out a chart onto the screens. "I even had the bike we were on scanned for any trace of his DNA, but I got nothing out of it. So I went back to the site and looked for his mask, which fell and broke after our fight," he said, picking up the chart. "And Lord and behold, I had a sample from small sheafing on his scales," he said, a bit too gleefully. "I can confirm he's a mutant, but it was going to take me a few days to find out if he could be well related." Donnie finished, pointing at a screen that seemed to be loading. Although April wasn't that smart to find out what it was doing, she was more interested in the fact that there's a chance that Goatface is related to her little brothers. "Okay, that's a lot. Do you think Goatface could really be related to you guys?" she said, taking her seat back in her chair. Donnie fidgets a bit before looking back at the screens. "It's a working theory," he said. "I mean, there's a lot of evidence pointing towards it." Donnie didn't want to believe that they could be related to an enemy they were sure to fight again soon. "Okay, so why haven't you told your brothers about any of this?" April said. Donnie let her words hang for a moment. He was lost in thought. "I don't know, I guess I'm just afraid." April looked taken aback, not sure what Donnie meant. "Afraid of what?" she asks him. Donnie looked back at the screen, seeing the many upon many videos of Goatface playing on repeat. He leans back in his chair. "I mean, he's a villain, April, and it seems he has no problem with hurting us," Donnie stated, referencing the screen showing Goatface as he actively aimed his weapons towards them. Well yeah, maybe Draxum has him under control, with a brain control thingy, April said, trying to reason with Dee. Unlikely after all, he helped me take down Big Mama, and let me walk away, Donnie said. Okay, you have a point there. But that still doesn't answer why you aren't telling your brothers about any of this. Donnie stared back at April as if she had said something out of ordinary. I thought it was obvious, he said, turning his chair to face her. I mean, how do you think they would react to this? They would most likely try to get him back, saying something like he's family, he said, answering his question. What's wrong with it? I mean, he would be family. Your brother. Sure, he's related, but still we don't know him. What if he turns his back on us or ends up being just like Draxum and tries to take you out just because you're a human? Donnie continued as April stood there, stunned. A part of her knew Donnie could be right, but that doesn't mean he should shun his brothers from this information. Not to mention we still don't have the whole picture ourselves. What if he's tortured or hurt? April stood up from her chair. Look, Donnie, I'm not going to force you to tell them this time. But you have to tell someone the moment you find out. You can't keep information like this away for long. And if they find out for themselves, Leo and Raph won't be happy about it, she said. Also, you shouldn't judge your possibly newfound brother by his background. Like you said, you don't know him. She continued, heading for the door. The door hissed open as she left the room. He looks at the monitor, seeing that outside she was talking to his brothers, who seemed to have a disappointed looks on their faces, before they all walked off to another part of the lair. Donnie sighed, reflecting on April's words. Should he be telling this finding to his brothers? No, he can't. If he did, they might try to go after him. And if they do, they might get captured by Draxum. He couldn't risk it. He looked back at the screen to see a progress bar. Even though he has the amount of DNA to see if Goatface has any connections to them, it would still be a few days before the results are in. He needed to now, especially with the appearance of April. His brother knows something is up and is getting concerned. Won't be long before Raph breaks the door down. He needed answers fast. His eyes go wide. Wait, that's it, he said, to no one in particular. If anyone was to know, it would be Dad, right? He continued. He began to close out all tabs on the computer showing the surveillance of Goatface, leaving only the progress bar of the DNA scanner open. He hides the tab and leaves the computer, grabs his tech bow, and opens the door to exit his lab. The door opens once more. He peeks out to make sure none of his siblings see him leave. He didn't need them to bombard him with questions about what he was doing in his lab. The coast was clear, and no siblings were in sight. He makes his way toward the living area. As he passes by, he can hear the chattering in the kitchen. They must be munching on the food Raph and Leo brought in earlier. As he approached the living area, he saw the projector playing Basic Cable. He stopped in his tracks. His thoughts were about how he should bring this up. But it seems life had other plans when his father spoke before he could put together his words. Purple, glad to see you out of your lab again. Donnie gulped. We'll get nothing here, he told himself. Oh, yeah, just need to ask about something. He decided to just get straight to the point. Splinter grumbled, slouching deeper into his chair. If this is about buying you uranium again, I have already said my piece. No uranium until you're 30, Splinter said, still not facing Donnie. What? No, that's not why I'm here, even though I still stand on it would be beneficial for us to have that kind of technology, Donnie said. He looks at the chair's back and starts approaching Splinter. I'm here for something else, Donnie said, now facing Splinter's, but still avoiding eye contact. Splinter faces his son. Oh well, then make it quick, I only have 3 minutes of commercials left, he said. Okay, well, you see, I think I found something, but I need you to confirm it. Splinter scrunched up his eyebrows in confusion. Oh, Purple, I'm no good at the science stuff. I don't think, Splinter tried to say, but was cut off by Donnie. Oh no. I would never ask you guys about any of that, he mumbled the last part. This is, well, more of a personal question, Donnie continued. You see, I found something in our genes. And turns out we have another sibling he made up, hoping his dad won't push further into that fake science he made up. He never was creative enough to make something up on the fly. He just hoped it was believed able enough to where he can get an answer. By his father's expression, he could tell it worked. He knew something about a missing sibling. How did you find that out? Splinter asked his son. Donnie felt a bullet of sweat drip. You know, a bunch of science stuff. But that's not the point. The point is, did we have another sibling? Donnie asked again. This time Splinter only faced the screen, unmoving. His face was scrunched up, not out of anger but something else. Donnie couldn't be sure. He was never really good at this whole emotional stuff. I suppose it's about time I told you boys, Splinter said. Donnie was taken aback by the sudden notion. Splinter got up from his sofa, startling Donnie further. He took notice of how his father made their way toward the kitchen. No wait, I was kinda hoping this could kinda stick between me and you, Donnie said, only to get a stare down from his dad. He and Splinter were never really that close, but he knew that look all too well from watching him interact with his twin, so he reluctantly followed his dad to the kitchen. In there April, Raph, and Leo were sitting talking, and eating some of the pizza and wings they bought. They greeted Splinter when he walked in. "Hey, Splints want some more pizza." Splinter put his hands up signaling that he was not here for the food. Donnie follows soon behind him a bit shyly. Both Leo and Raph have surprised looks on their faces. "Oh hey Don Tron, and here I thought you died in there," Leo said snarkily. Raph seemed to nudge Leo, silently telling him not to aggravate Donnie. "Now is not the time for your antics, Blue. I have an important matter to discuss," Splinter said, taking a seat at the head of the table in the middle of the kitchen. "Is this about the TV remote again? I swear it wasn't me this time," Leo blurted out as Donnie took a seat next to April. "Leo," Raph snarled out. "No, this is not that," Splinter said, having a sorrowful look on his face. The group of teens exchanged glances beside Donnie, knowing what his dad was referring to. Splinter cleared his throat before beginning. "Before I tell you this tale, I have something to confess," he said. The group leaned in. A bullet of sweat drops down Splinter's fur coat. "I am in fact Lou Jitsu." The group burst out into laughter. "That's gotta be the funniest joke you said, Pops." "You Lou Jitsu," Raph said, continuing to laugh by the end of his sentence. "Is this what you had to tell us?" "Okay, Dad, good joke," Leo said, adding on with Raph's laughter. Splinter sat there grumbling as all the teens sat there laughing. Eventually, he grew tired of their behavior. "I am Lou Jitsu," Splinter partially sounded. "All right, Splint's sure you Lou Jitsu," April said as the laughter died down in the room. "But it is true. Haven't you ever wondered what happened to Lou Jitsu?" Splinter slightly shouted. "Well yeah, I'm sure he just is in retirement or something," Leo added. Splinter was now getting annoyed by the teens, though he couldn't blame them. He had renounced that life long ago. He didn't. "I was kidnapped by a crime boss named Big Mom, who forced me to fight," Splinter said. His words came out strained from the memory. His words made the room fall silent. "Wait, did you say Big Mama?" Leo began. Splinter swallowed the lump that had formed in his throat. "Yes, it was before I had you three," Splinter continued, clumping his hands together. The whole group exchanged glances. "I was there for at least a decade before a yokai named Baron Draxum took me from her prison. There he used my genes to create 4 turtles that he planned to use to take over the surface." Splinter paused at the memory. He cleared his throat before continuing to avoid eye contact with the teens who were currently silently listening to every word that came out. "I couldn't allow him to turn such indecent creatures into beings of destruction, so I broke out taking you with me," Splinter finished. The group was left shocked mainly by different news. Donnie and April were shocked. They had been right about the possibility of a missing brother, but their father had kept this wrapped up for years. Sure, he was never keen on storytelling, but this felt important. Leo and Raph stood there shocked both by the fact that one of their dads was Lou Jitsu, and the fact that Dad had said 4. "Wait, you said 4? But there's only 3 of us." "No offense, April," Raph asked. Splinter's face grew dim. "Yes, there were 4 of you," Splinter said, this time facing the teens. "He was smaller when I had him. He probably would have been around your age too." Splinter let out a hefty laugh before his face went dark again. But during our escape, I had lost him. I had fallen when a piece of the roof collapsed. In the process I dropped you all." He stares at his sons, feeling his heart ached. There was smoke everywhere, and as the smoke spread the air got thinner. "I only narrowly escaped, but when I left I only had you 3. Splinter looked back down to his lap as the memory took over here. Everyone in the room went silent. "Is there any way he could have you know?" Donnie said, breaking the silence. Splinter thought on it. "No, I don't believe anything could have survived that." The room went silent again. A sudden screech snapped the teen back to reality. Splinter had gotten up and was heading for the door. "Dad," Raph said. Splinter didn't say anything. He just waved him off and continued to the door. The teens stood where they were, at least until Donnie got up. He left the kitchen without a word. April had a sour look on her face before chasing after him. "Donnie, wait." April managed to catch up to Donnie before he entered his lab. Donnie looks at her. "May I help you?" he said, still trying to make his way to his lab. "Donnie, what are you doing?" Donnie stopped his pursuit. "I'm heading to my lab." "I thought that was obvious," he said, turning to April with his arms crossed. "You know what I'm talking about," April said, mimicking Donnie's position. Nothing comes to mind," Donnie said. April's eyebrows clumped together. "Why haven't you said anything yet?" she said as she poked his plastron. "There's nothing to say in April," Donnie said, trying to make a beeline to his lab. April runs in front of him to cut him off. "Oh no, you don't," Donnie grumbles as she has her arms stretched out in a wide position. "You can't keep this to yourself forever, Donnie. They all need to know," she said, still blocking the entrance to his lab. "Splinter just confirmed it, and you kept silent," she said. "You're right, he confirmed that he didn't make it." Now if you'll excuse me, I have to conclude this research, Donnie said as he walked past April. April didn't make an effort to stop him this time. For everyone's sake, I hope you're right. Donnie entered his lab, opening up the tabs again only to close them off. Dad confirmed it. He kept telling himself. He got to the tab with the progress bar on it, and to his surprise it was almost finished, just a few more hours, and the results would be in. Donnie's mouse hovered over the X. Donnie sighed, looking at the time. It was 10 p.m. Well, I suppose I could wait for the results. Just to verify, of course, Donnie stated before walking away from the computer screen. Donnie was tweaking one of his latest inventions. It was an AI he made for the lair to, at least, clean the messes around the house. It still needed a few more tweaks, but it was almost ready to be shown off. Small ding came from his computer. Donnie looked up from his invention as he pushed his wheelie chair to look at the screen. A small tab had appeared. It stated that the analysis was done. Donnie gulped as his head started to remember what Dad had said earlier. No, I don't believe anything could have survived that. He pressed the tab as the analytics for the samples popped up. His brothers and his samples were matching except for some strands due to them still being different species. He checked the one from Goatface next. Well, Goatface is a turtle. His DNA points to him being some kind of a box turtle. There was also a mutation in his DNA as well. Donnie frowned, but when he saw the comparison rates he shot up from his chair, causing it to sway off to the side. An 83% match. Oh, brother Michelangelo was looking through some files that were laid out on a table. They had images of some of the mutants that had been bitten. Draxum had been keeping an eye on all the mutants roaming the surface, at least the ones that he could find. He was currently looking at the file of a pig mutant. He went by the name Meat Sweats, which to be honest is a step up from his old name Rupert. Draxum didn't have much about him in the file other than his ability, name, and status, although he does remember him from when he was spying on the turtles. Honestly, he was pretty cool. He could take another's power and leave the person exhausted and drained. Sure, the way he obtained them was a bit unnecessary, but with one sniff of the mutated silverfish, he could understand, sorta. The purple one said something about Meat Sweats being a missing chef. Almost made Michael want to cook again like he did when he was younger. He loved it. It was probably one of his favorite parts of basic training. He wishes Draxum would teach him again, but any time he brought it up he would always respond with no. I need to finish stabilizing this formula. Or the one he currently uses, or no time. Besides, you should be training, he sighs before putting down the file with the others. He turns after hearing the clippity-clapping of hooves approaching. At the door was his father. He straightened out. Lord Draxum, he says, adding a slight bow to his poster. At ease, Draxum said as he entered the room. He walks to the table, seeing paper files scattered. He sees small notes on some of them as well. I see you're taking a look at the files again, Draxum said, looking at the table. Oh yes, I just want to be sure about our small collection, and once the gargoyles get back they can finish it, Michelangelo said, staring at the files on the table. Well, that's good to hear. Best to be thorough before I unleash my plan, he said, looking back at him. But this is not what I came to here for, he said as he pulled from his back a mask. But not any mask. His mask was all brand new again. Here, since you broke the last one, he said. Michael looked at him wide-eyed. Wait, how did you know I broke it? He asked, taking the mask. I didn't know. You just confirmed it, Draxum stated with a small smirk. Michelangelo looked down at his feet. You're not in trouble after all. It was bound to happen at some point. I take it one of the turtles saw you. Michael only nods his head, looking slightly back up. No matter, Draxum replied. Once I have eliminated them they won't be a bother. He continued, staring at the files on the table. But I do still need you to wear it, Draxum said, picking up one of the files and inspecting it. Michael looks back up. For what purpose? He asked. Simple. When I reveal the plan to these mutants, I don't need one of them attacking you. Especially since you do look alike with the targets, Draxum urged out as he continued reading the file in hand. Michelangelo looks down at the mask he was holding and cracked a small smile. I understand. Thank you, Draxum, he said, catching himself at the end before he could say Dad. Draxum noticed as well, only staring at him, but didn't say anything. Now, go? Big Mama called earlier today. She had requested to see you, Draxum said as he put the file down. Michael's stomach dropped. Did she say what for? He asked his father. Draxum looked at the teen. No, I didn't bother pressing. After all, we're not exactly on good terms with her, Draxum said before making his way to leave the room. Leave your weapon. The last thing I need is her men attacking us, he continued as he left. Michael unsheathed his weapon, staring at it for a hot minute before placing it on the table. It'll be quick, he told himself, heading out to put on his gear. After arriving, the guards were leading him to Big Mama. This way, lad, one of the bellhops said as they made a turn. In the hall there stood a small flight of stairs leading up to a large double door. As they approached there were two large bellhops, the bear and a shark yokai. He made his way to the door ready to face Big Mama. But the bear yoki had put their paw in front of him, blocking his path. "Can't let you in until you lose the getup," they said, pointing at his upper torso. "What? Why?" Michael asked, crossing his arms. "Sorry, kid, Big Mama's orders. Can't risk you carrying any weapons, you know how this is," they said. Michelangelo grumbled, only removing his mask and hood. "Put them in here," the shark yokai said, holding a box. He placed them in the box, with which the shark yokai walked away. "All right, I presume you don't have any weapons on you?" the bear yokai asked him. "No," he said to them. "Alrighty then," they said as they opened the door. Michael entered the room. Inside there were a few waiters and bartenders around, courtesy of this being Big Mama's personal lounge. Looking ahead, he saw Big Mama in her spider form sitting on a large couch. She was staring outside the large balcony, presumably watching the battle nexus. "Maya's at my angle," she said as she turned to look at the entrance. "Maya, it is truly wonderful to see you again, dear." She used her spider legs and crawled over the sofa to approach Michelangelo. "Hello, Big Mama," Michael said, avoiding eye contact. Big Mama frowns. "Oh please, that's no way to greet me now, is it, Angle?" She reverted to her humanoid form. "Come on now," she said, holding her arms out, asking for a hug. Michael was hesitant but gave in. "Sorry, Mama," he said as he hugged her. Big Mama smirked before she patted his head, signaling that he could let go. "Well, now that I have you here, let us talk," she said, motioning for him to join her on the balcony. Michelangelo followed her. Once out, he sees the fighting that is taking place in the arena. "Oh, don't you just love it? The smell of the fresh blood, the fighting, the sounds of my wonderful audience cheering as you take the final breath of the opponent," Big Mama said, as Michael only stared out into the memory. "You know I miss having you out there, Angle, taking on some of my strongest competitors as if they were nothing. I'm sure you could have been champ if Draxum hadn't had that deal," Big Mama said, now looking at Michelangelo. "Thank you, Mama, but there's no need to exaggerate," Michelangelo said, still avoiding eye contact. Big Mama frowned before gently cupping his cheeks, making him look at her. "Oh, don't be silly. When I first saw you, I knew you were champion material," she said. Michael brushes her hands off his face. "Thank you, Mama. But if you only brought me here for the pleasantry, then I really must get going now," he said as he makes his way to the door, only to be stopped by two yokai. Big Mama sighs. "Oh, Michi, she said, leaning over the balcony. "You're right, I did not bring you here for the pleasantries," she said, coming back inside the lounge. "You see, I brought you here due to your behavior from last week." Michael's eyes widened. "You see, you and your turly friend had embarrassed Big Mama, and I believe you know how important reputation is in my line of work," she continues as a bellhop brings her a box. Michelangelo feels his whole body urging him to run and hide. Mama, wait," he said, taking a step back. Big Mama shoots a glance at the bellhoppers behind him. That was all the bellhops needed to know. He needed to be restrained. They imminently grab both of his arms, bringing him down to his knees. He desperately wiggles in their grasp. Big Mama opens the box given to her by the other bellhopper. "You know, I truly was hoping I wouldn't have to use this on you again," she said as she took out a black metal collar, with a small rectangular box connecting the metal band. There was a small band that was on the corner of the box, currently blinking red. "But alas, I can't have you thinking you could make a fool out of me and get away with it," she said as she approached him. He wiggled in the yokai's grasp, desperately trying to leave. But his retaliation just made things worse. One of the yokai pinned him down by his shell, causing him to practically lay down on the floor. Big Mama hands one of the bellhoppers the collar. Michael hears a beep from the collar. He struggles, still trying to wiggle his way to freedom. It's no use. He hears the threatening beep again. This time, it was the collar now strapped around his neck. His fight or flight response is kicking in now as he feels himself wanting to crawl into his shell. Even if it's no use, the bellhopper finally lets go of his arms and instinctively makes his hands attempt to pry off the collar. "Oh, Angle, you know it's no use," Big Mama said, pulling out a remote control from the same box. "The only way to get out of that collar is to, well, obey," she said as she pressed a button on the remote. The collar imminently tightens around his neck. His airwave is blocked and imminently he tries to gasp for air, only to let out a heek. He desperately claws at the collar. "Oh, Michael, just stop fighting it and accept the punishment," Big Mama says as she watches. Michael was now holding his breath, trying to find a way to get the collar off, but the more energy he spent on it, the harder it became. His vision was now fading to black, and his body movements are getting slower. He thinks Big Mama is talking, but the world around him seemed to become fuzzy. His movements began to slow down as less and less air was filling his lungs. His eyes began to droop. "Is this it?" he thinks to himself. "Am I dying? No, I don't want to leave." His vision is slowly being consumed by darkness. "I'm not ready yet." Both of his limbs fall to the floor in a desperate plea of holding himself up. "Not here, not now, please help." His vision begins to fade in and out of the darkness as he makes a last attempt for air. "Dad?" There's a beep. Michelangelo gasps for air as the collar releases its pressure. He begins to cough as his lungs get used to the reintroduction of air. Another beep is heard which makes him squeeze his eyes closed, expecting the collar to tighten again. He snaps back to reality when he hears a clunk in front of him. Opening his eyes to see the collar had fallen off. After taking a few more breaths, he looked up to see Big Mama towering over him. She knelt to be at eye level with him. The room was silent despite the number of bodies in there. Michelangelo was still trying to regain the air in his lungs. His body felt too weak after what felt like hours of oxygen lost. Big Mama harshly grabs his cheeks, forcing him to look at her. Out of fear, he grabs her wrist in a small attempt of pleading for her to stop. Tears threatened to prick his eyes. Please, he let out in a very hushed tone. Oh, Angel, it pains me to see you this way, she cooed. Her grip tightened on his face. Michelangelo winced at the pain. His throat started feeling sore. So let me offer you some advice. She leans over to say something directly in his ear. Never turn your back on Mama, she whispers harshly in his ear before tossing him to the side. Michael inches himself up, his body still exhausted. You were created as a weapon. Remember your place, she said before walking off, saying something to one of the guards as she left. A box was dropped right by the side of him. Big Mama says you're free to leave, one of the bellhops said as they left along with the other bullhops. Michelangelo was left in the room alone. Now he can hear the cheering from outside. He picked himself up, rubbing his neck, wincing at the pain. It was sure to bruise the next day. Warm liquid falls down his cheeks. How long has he been crying? Wiping his cheeks, he peers into the box to see his belongings. He placed in it earlier. He only stares at the box before tears begin to fall. Notes. Hello, you must be here for the trigger warning. Well, here you go, grinning face. Major TW, child abuse, domestic abuse, torture, and strangling. Let me know if I missed any. Minor TW, bad science explanation, probably inaccurate character personality. Well, hope you enjoyed it.